to you from the International City-County Management Association Annual Conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. I'm Lauren Palmer, the co-founder of EverStrive Solutions, a full-service public sector consulting firm, and your host for this episode. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. This week, GovLove is on site in the Burgh at the ICMA Conference, the premier gathering for local government management officials. We are discovering new ideas and solutions at conference sessions, and we are talking with an incredible lineup of ICMA guests about the latest topics and trends in local government management. My guest for today's episode is Andy Pederson, the village manager of Bayside, Wisconsin. We are visiting with Andy about his career in city management and his role as the chair of the ICMA Governance Task Force. Andy, welcome to GovLove.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you making time in your conference agenda to come visit with us on the pod.
Yeah, it's great to be here today. I really appreciate it.
All right, great. Well, before we get into the heart of our interview, we always like to begin with a lightning round for our guests just to get to know you a little bit better. So my first question for you, Andy, is other than your last city council meeting packet, what is something that you are reading or watching that you recommend to our listeners?
Sure. I think one of the things I just recently finished, I have a lot of time in the car, so I do audiobooks from time to time, and I just finished Cheryl Scully's book, Greedy Bastards, about city management, and it was quite the listen, and just understanding all the trials and tribulations that were within her career and within her experience in San Antonio was pretty interesting to listen to.
Yeah, she's incredible. We had her as a guest on GovLove talking about her book when it first came out, and I'm a big Cheryl Scully fangirl, so definitely a great recommendation. If our listeners have missed that, they need to go back and pick up that book. It's very enlightening. Mm-hmm. All right, Andy, next question. You got into town on Friday. What have you enjoyed the most about Pittsburgh so far?
You know, Pittsburgh, it's just it's a beautiful city. It reminds me a lot of Milwaukee, quite honestly. We have Lake Michigan in Wisconsin, but with all the rivers in Pittsburgh, just the scenery, the cleanliness of the community, the stadiums on the rivers, just a really great experience. I remember being here about 15 years ago for the conference, and a lot of enhancements, walking down to the Strip District, and is a great experience on a Saturday morning as well. So I was able to take in a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, it's really an incredible city. We are both dating ourselves here. I have not been to Pittsburgh since the last ICMA conference was here. It was 17 years ago. We were pretty close.
All right.
But yeah, I just walking around, it's like, it's bringing back some memories. Like, this is a really cool, very walkable community.
Yes.
Yeah, go Pittsburgh. It's fun having the conference here again. And then one more question for you. What is your best tip for maximizing a conference experience?
I think, people approach the conferences, there's so many great educational experiences, but the networking and just talking to peers. Last night I ran into someone, the community I work for is a small community, and the person I was talking to works for a very small community, and we were just trading stories about, some of the things that we deal with on a daily basis. And I think, more outreach you can do and really be out there and connect, because you have an audience of 5,000 or 6,000 people that generally want to share their story and talk to you about their experience, and you can learn from each other. And I think that's one of the most valuable pieces of the conference experience I get each year.
Yeah, exactly. 5,000 or 6,000 of your closest friends.
Right, exactly.
And, for ELGL, that's what we're all about, engaging local government leaders. So we love to hear those stories of networking and making those connections. So I'm glad you highlighted that. Well, all right, Andy, let's get into the heart of our interview. I always like to start by just asking guests to tell us about your career path and how you got into your current role in Bayside.
Yeah, so I've been in Bayside for almost coming up on 20 years.
It's incredible.
It's hard to believe.
Congratulations.
But, thank you. It's been a great community to work for. I went to graduate school up in the Twin Cities in the Minneapolis area, and started out as an intern and then an assistant in the city of Apple Valley, Minnesota. Moved back to Wisconsin, served in a couple capacities as assistant, and then, like I said, I've been in Bayside the last 20 years. So been very fortunate.
That's awesome that you feel fortunate. It must be a great community if you've stuck around.
Yeah. It's, I like, Bayside is a community of just under 5,000 people. It's a small community, but it's in the metro area of Milwaukee. It's about 10 miles from downtown Milwaukee. We're located on the shores of Lake Michigan, and we do a lot of joint collaboration with our other communities. So on a daily basis, we can serve up to 65 or 70,000 people. So we maintain that small feel, but provide services for a lot more. So it's been a balance. There's always a challenge and a lot of great opportunity in the community.
I love that, Andy. Our longtime listeners will know that I have a background in regional governance, working for a regional council. So I love hearing these stories of you saying that you're collaborating with your neighbors to deliver services.
Yeah, we do. We run everything. We run a regional dispatch center for 7 communities and a joint fire department, to shared library, shared health, shared IT, shared court. So there's a lot of collaboration and consolidation that we've done over the years too.
That's progressive.
Mm-hmm.
So you told us a little bit. Is there anything else that you want to share about the Bayside community? Just any more fun facts that we should know?
Yeah, like I said, we're located on the shores of Lake Michigan. There's very little public access to the lake because it's mostly private residences, but we're very fortunate. We have about a 200-acre nature center, the Schlitz Audubon Nature Center, that is right on Lake Michigan as well. So it's a little jewel in the community.
Oh, and is that part of your municipal government?
It's not part of the municipal
Okay.
government. We have, they're I think they're a nonprofit, but we have strong partnerships with them in the things we do and how we work together with them. So
great. So what's something that you're currently working on in Bayside that's got you energized and enjoying your job?
Yeah, I think, a couple things come to mind. One is that, I mentioned the Regional Dispatch Center. We're working to expand that and change some of our service delivery models. And so that has been, and we were just designated as the primary dispatch center in Milwaukee County, which was really an honor. One of the other bigger things that we're working on is there's been our commercial area, which is rather small. We're primarily a residential community, but our commercial area is the majority of that is being redeveloped right now. And so the first building in the redevelopment just opened up in the last couple of weeks. We're also in the process of fundraising to build a new municipal library to go in that development that's shared by 4 communities. So it's been both interesting and challenging to work through that.
Yeah, that's a big project.
Yes.
When you say you were picked as the regional dispatch center, am I characterizing that correctly? Tell me about that process. Who picked you?
Yeah, so the state of Wisconsin is looking to encourage consolidation and collaboration within the 911 field. Most counties in the state of Wisconsin have one or maybe a couple dispatch centers. The Milwaukee County actually has 13 or 14, and so they have funds that can be allocated each year to those respective counties or the primary dispatch center within each county. So a body of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Council, which is made up of the chief elected officials of each municipality in our county, made that selection, and we were the Village of Bayside, representing the 7 North Shore communities, the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County, were the 3 in the running, and we were selected.
Okay, very good. It sounds like quite an accomplishment. All right. Well, I'm going to pivot now. Andy, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast was to learn more about the work that you are doing with the ICMA Governance Task Force. Mm-hmm. So for our listeners who may not be ICMA members, can you just tell us a little bit about this group and what it is?
Yeah, so the task force was created back in the middle of last year, and really the overall focus was to look at the overall governance structure of ICMA. ICMA currently has a 21-member board, primarily selected by regions, throughout the United States and internationally, and then there's a president, past president, and president-elect that also serve on the board. The group is a group of 18 individuals that represent all the regions from throughout the country and globally as well. And we were selected from approximately 250 applicants to take a comprehensive look at the governance structure. I'm not aware, at least dating back to 1980 and probably longer in the 100 years of the history, where ICMA has taken a look at the entire governance structure as a whole, from how people are elected to how to run for the executive board, to length of term. I mean, you name it, we are taking a comprehensive look at it. And so we were charged with that responsibility back in, I believe, June of last year, and have been working on that since.
It sounds like a big undertaking. Can you talk a little bit more about what motivated the creation of this task force? And I guess before I let you answer, I'll just say, not all of our listeners are ICMA members, many are, but I think everyone can relate to this idea of a professional association or a nonprofit board or entities like ICMA kind of rethinking their structure and looking toward the future. So I'd love to have you just share a little bit more about some of that thinking and what motivated that work for ICMA.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken, Lauren, and you're hearing of a lot of organizations that are looking at their governance structure and how it works. You want to try to balance the efficiency of governance with, the democratic process as well. And I think, as I mentioned, in ICMA's history, I'm not aware of the group ever looking at the governance structure as a whole and really assessing it to see what needs to, be modified, what's working, what's not, and such. There's been, small modifications and changes over the years, but they've been small in nature, generally addressing one issue or a weakness or something like that. But I think this helps to really align with, the strategic plan that was adopted a few years back by ICMA, and then really looks at the future to try to make sure that we're, representing the membership as a whole and developing and building off the strengths we have. And quite frankly, we understand and we've heard a lot of, issues or concerns that have been raised too about the current governance structure. So we want to try to address those as well.
Oh, that's great. I know that you are still in the middle of your work. You had a big meeting this week at the conference, and as I understand it, you're not finalizing your recommendations to the ICMA Executive Board until later this year. But can you give us a sneak preview? What are some of the key recommendations or items that the task force has under consideration?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of additional background on what the types of dimensions that we've looked at. Over those past 15 months, we've held meetings pretty much every month. The group is a great group. They signed up for about a year process, and we've gone a little bit long, but I think that illustrates the complexity of the process we have, and I think that's one of the things that we've heard through and through is it can be a very complex process that is very different, possibly from region to region. We've also held focus groups with every region. I think there were a total of 10 to 12 focus groups with members in each region, with regional leadership and things like that to understand the concerns for those people that are more involved in the process, and honestly for anybody to gather feedback as well. There's 9 dimensions that we've really looked at from a task force perspective. To rattle them off sort of quickly, we've looked at everything from term length to the election process, the diversity criteria that ICMA has defined or needs to better define over time as well. We're taking a really hard look at the representation within the regions as well and how those regions are aligned. We've had a lot of demographic shifts in our membership, and there's an imbalance right now in the number of members between regions. So frankly, that's one of the things we've been taking a look at. And I think, one of the things that has developed a significant amount of conversation. We've also looked at, the advisory boards and how those feeder systems play into, possible service on the executive board. We've looked at the possibility of at-large versus designated seats, as well as what are the voting rights of board members that serve, on the board as well. So there's been a whole host. There's been no shortage of issues to discuss. A lot of this has been about trying to educate the task force, re-educate members and leadership as well, because this process just isn't for ICMA, for its members. The state associations are involved. There's regional rotation agreements. So there's many layers to this, and we're trying to unpack all that and make the best recommendations that we can forward to the board.
Yeah, so 9 dimensions. You've got a lot going on there. There was one thing that you said that I picked up on, this imbalance of the regions. So again, can you just, for our listeners who may not be ICMA insiders, explain how the current process works? Board members are selected from among regions, and what I thought I heard you say is that regional representation isn't proportionally representative of the ICMA membership. But I want to give you the opportunity to correct me if I'm wrong or explain that a little more.
Yeah, no, great point. And to back up, yeah, so each region, there's 5 regions within the U.S. and then 1 global region. There's 3 VPs or vice presidents for each region that are selected. Over the years with population shifts and just, frankly, the prominence of city management in certain states versus other states can really vary. And I'm thinking off the top of my head here, but the state of California has about the same number of members of ICMA as the Northeast region. And we've seen that balance over time. I think I just heard this morning that the Midwest region has the second largest number of members within the country, and I believe it's close to 3,000. And again, this isn't pitting region against region. When we look at the Northeast, there's about 1,000 members. And so one of the things that we've talked about too is there something that should be put into the process on an ongoing basis to rebalance that almost along the lines of a census count, every so often to make sure that there's equal representation of those, if it's 3 members or however many members are representing that region, that there's a balance there as well. So that's, again, there's implications with all of that, and certainly there's a lot of opinion. There's a lot of emotion, quite frankly, too, when it comes down to something like governance, as we experience in our own day-to-day jobs as well. Anytime you look at things like this, it's incredibly complicated.
Yeah, of course. What issue has generated the most dialogue among the task force members?
That is a great question. And I would say too, it just hasn't been the task force, but with the focus groups and things like that, we've had a lot of different conversation. I will probably say that the regional conversation in the regions themselves has generated a significant amount of conversation. I think one of the things that, as we've gone through the process, one of the things that's become clearly evident is that somehow we need to simplify the process. It's overly complicated. Actually, yesterday at the end of our 4-hour meeting, we still had a lot of questions, and I said, think about this. We have gone through this for 15 months, and we're still working to understand all the intricacies and nuances of the governance process. If we have someone that wants to apply to be on the executive board, we need to create a pathway that's simpler, that hopefully, and my personal opinion is, if we can summarize it on one page, so that here's sort of the quick guidebook of how to, put your name in, serve on the executive board. I will speak as a former board member. I served on the board it's been over 10 years ago now. It's the experience of a lifetime. It's truly an honor. You have a greater appreciation for all the things that ICMA does, and I think our goal is to make sure that more people have that opportunity. A lot of times, people say the stars need to align both professionally and personally to get on the executive board, and I think we're trying to remove some of those barriers as well. So there's so many things that have generated so much conversation. It's probably hard to narrow it down to just one, but those are a few that come to mind.
Got it. ICMA is celebrating the 100-year anniversary of its Code of Ethics, and ICMA members, of course, know that is a hallmark of ICMA and the city management profession. I'm just curious how, if at all, did the Code of Ethics factor into any of your discussions and recommendations on the task force?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, the Code of Ethics is ingrained in who we are, everything we're about. So that's been one of the foundations, and it comes up in many different ways, thinking of an example of how it came up yesterday, in the conversation about, the potential to have multiple people on the ballot. And, the idea of having people campaign, how does that impact the Code of Ethics and things like that? And we're not looking to, go down that path of having people campaign. So how do you structure that in a way that, promotes the Code of Ethics in a way that doesn't create auxiliary challenges as a result of our recommendations?
Yeah, got it. So how can ICMA members, or maybe not ICMA members, or people who are just curious about governance. How can people learn more and get more informed or get involved in this work?
Yeah, I would encourage, any member, any non-member, whoever has an interest, has an idea, a comment, whatever it may be, they can certainly reach out to me directly. The task force was set up so that there is a certain number of representatives from each region, and I know that and maybe the easiest way, just because in this format of a podcast, is to reach out to the state association, the state association director, because they've all been involved in those focus groups and they could help channel to the right person. I know that speaking on behalf of the task force, because I know many of them have done it, have met with their state association boards as well to have that conversation, to understand the challenges. You can also reach out to the ICMA regional directors who have been involved in this conversation too, because they, tend to, be interfacing with the members on a daily basis and getting feedback. So I think there's a multitude of ways to do that, but certainly I'm speaking for all 18 of us when we say that we're happy to, take anybody's feedback and have conversations about how we can improve this.
Well, that's great. Thanks for being open about that. So what's next? You said people signed up for a year. You've gone a little bit longer than that. Are you on track to complete your work by the end of the year?
So the phase one portion, we're using the phasing term now. The phase one task force had a very productive meeting yesterday. We're looking to hopefully finalize some options and recommendations that will go into a phase two. One of the things that we've really approached, and under the leadership of President Pluckham and incoming President Tanya Angie, there's been the development of a phase two, which will mix about 6 to 7 executive board members. And on the governance task force, the members were able to volunteer if they wanted to go on to phase two, and I believe there's going to be probably 8 members that will be appointed to a phase two task force, and then there's 2 global engagement committee members that will also be appointed as well to take that. And the thought behind that is that whatever recommendations the task force comes up with are going to need to go to the executive board. We'd like to really have a healthy conversation and help facilitate that process. So that involvement of the executive board, I think, is really important moving forward, because this will probably require whatever the recommendations are, changes in process, changes in guidelines, even potentially constitutional changes, and that will take action of the executive board. So we'd, preferably come up with recommendations that will be that will have the consensus of the group, and they'll be able to help have that conversation at the executive board level when we get there. So I don't have an exact time frame on when phase two will complete, but we're trying to all work as expeditiously as possible, but also giving it the respect that it's due, because this is a very complicated subject, as we've all learned.
It's a big project. I'd love to just visit with you a little bit about your experience serving on an ICMA committee like this. Yeah. What advice would you give to ICMA members who are interested in service on a committee or a task force?
Sign up. I have had the pleasure and honor of serving on multiple committees over time. Every committee is a little bit different. Everyone requires a little bit different time commitment. I'll certainly say that chairing this committee has been a different time element than others, but it's so rewarding because it's not only helping the association, but it's getting to know peers and members who become lifelong colleagues and friends, quite frankly. And so, I know there's an annual call for volunteers, and even, just starting out on, what is your passion, whether it's government affairs or digital technology or smart communities or sustainability, get involved. You really get out of the membership what you put into it, and this is a great way to do it. And some people think it's a huge time commitment. Obviously, with technology changing and doing things virtually, it makes it a lot easier to be able to participate.
What about you and your role as the chair? Was the time commitment manageable in addition to your day job of running a city? It's
definitely it's definitely been manageable. I mean, it's certainly been a time commitment, but I'll credit the ICMA staff that we've worked with. They've done a phenomenal job in helping facilitate and prepare materials, prepare background information. So it's that delicate balance. We all know in city management that it's not a 9-to-5 job. No. So the job at home certainly needs to get done, and but this also too is an honor. And I will say, of all the task forces and committees that I've been in ICMA, you do learn a lot that you can take back to your community to help you be a better manager as well.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. Maybe there's an example you could give us. I wanted to know what was most rewarding to you about this process.
I think back to one example, back when I was on the ICMA executive board, as simple as this may sound, when I chaired the finance committee on the executive board for about a year and a half, and one of the things that we did was approve the financial policies every year. And I thought, most communities I had been in, you approve them once and you may never come back to them, until something comes up and you need to modify that change. It's something we adopted and we still do to this day every year. I was probably 5 or 6 years into my tenure in my community, and something we've done. Again, something small, but just something that's always stuck out to me as well. That's a really good practice. I think the other thing is just talking to people, and you're, like I said, these people become lifelong friends. You go in not knowing anybody, and you come out becoming very good friends. Of having that ability to bounce, problems, concerns, ideas off people. And there's a genuine passion there with people, and that's one of the things that really sticks out. It's been beneficial.
That's great. So we've got several days left at the conference, but what has been the most thought-provoking thing you have seen or heard so far at the conference?
Yeah, so far a lot of my time at the conference has been in governance task force meetings around that subject. But, I was thinking about a conversation I was having with President-elect Angie. And, she was talking about how membership matters. And I think that really, it's gotten me to think a lot. And it's not only about just the membership, but it's about the engagement as a member, that the effort that you make, that you put into it. It's not just about being an ICMA member, but it's, from back to what you asked, Lauren, about, being part of a committee, being involved, connecting with people. Heard a long time ago, from an ICMA staff member, connection before content. And I think that was so, that resonated with me about that, because we can learn a lot in our sessions, and we can learn just as much, if not more, from our peers. And so that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to in the next few days.
Great thought. Well, Angie, I really appreciate this. I've learned some new things about the Governance Task Force, so I'm eager to maybe follow up and learn more. But is there anything else that you want to share or talk about before we wrap up today?
No, I just, thank you, Lauren, for the opportunity. I really, and on the podcast, I want to thank all the committee members for all of their work, and it's truly been an insightful process. And certainly, as we mentioned, if anybody would like to discuss this further, certainly reach out. There will be ample opportunity, and look forward to going into the next phase of this process.
Okay, great. Well, I've got just one more question for you. If you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
You gave me this question in advance, and I still don't have an answer. I'm not sure, since we've been talking so much with governance, I'm not sure that there's a good theme song walking out. But
this says a lot about you as a manager, Andy. You just nailed all the hard questions, and then the easy question, it's kind of intimidated you a little bit. That's okay.
I will tell you, this question stressed me out the most.
Well, gosh, GovLove's supposed to be a good time. I didn't want to add any stress, but that, you know what? If you think of something, you can throw it at us. If not, we'll get the mystery grab bag from our production team. I'm sure they'll pick a great song for you to go with our theme of governance here and our theme of engagement. I'm really glad that that came out in our conversation. Yeah. Just a lot of our listeners are ICMA members. Of course, most of our listeners are ELGL members. So in whatever way people decide to engage in those professional associations, I hope they heard a message today of just getting involved. I love what you said about connection before content. That's a good nugget to leave us with. All right. That ends our episode today. I want to again thank so much our guest, Andy Pederson, the village manager from Bayside, Wisconsin. And I want to thank our partner, ICMA, for hosting us at this year's conference. So thank you for listening. You can reach us at elgl.org/GovLove or on social media at GovLove Podcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.